Welcome, everybody, to episode 1. That's right, the debut episode of Black and Gold Weekly. Really excited to get this show off the ground. It's a new Boston Bruins show here on YouTube in partnership with Black and Gold Productions, LLC. Huge thank you to Mark and all of the team at Black and Gold Productions for giving me the opportunity to have this show. I am your host, John Duncan, here. I'll be here each and every week talking about the Boston Bruins, who I am certainly a huge fan of. And we're just going to have a fun hockey show here, talking about the team and everything going on surrounding them. For this first episode, I have a very special guest here. He's a great friend of mine, a huge Boston sports fan. We went to college together. That's where we met and became friends. It's Mr. Danny Jaillet. Danny, thank you so much for coming on for the first episode, man. You're the debut guest.
I'm fired up. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate you coming on today. There's so much to talk about. Hockey is just around the corner, less than 2 weeks away now. But obviously in the Boston Bruins world, there is big news. This is how we have to start the show. Not how I originally planned to start it, but Zdeno Chara signs a 1-year deal with the Washington Capitals, not coming back to the Boston Bruins. He's kind of been talked about a lot this offseason, just about, whether or not he would be back. And now we have our answer. So what are your thoughts on the Chara situation, him not coming back, how the Bruins handled this thing, and just your thoughts on Chara?
I'm going to break this down into 2 parts. Zdeno Chara, I'll start with Zdeno Chara, the person.
Mm-hmm.
He is going to be greatly missed in Boston. He was a great ambassador for the Bruins, both on and off the ice. He never got into any trouble off the ice. He was always a positive member in the community. You would see him at Boston Children's Hospital and doing toy drives and things like that. He always handled himself with class, and he always made sure to put his teammates first and sacrificed everything for his teammates, playing with broken ribs and a punctured lung against St. Louis in the Stanley Cup final. And he was just a true warrior. Even if his legs may have been failing him a little bit towards the end of his Boston tenure, he still strapped up the skates and went to play. And that was something I always really admired about him. And he was doing it for Boston for, 14 years?
Yeah, 14 seasons with the Bruins, captain for all of them.
Yep.
Just insane career. With Zdeno Chara, it's such a emotional topic for Bruins fans, and it's such a complex topic because you have the legend that is Zdeno Chara and everything he's done for this team, everything he's done for this organization, and how great of a player and a captain and a leader he has been for the last 14 years. But then on the other side of things, you have the fact that his play has significantly declined over the past couple of seasons, and certainly declined this past year noticeably to where he can't skate anymore. He doesn't move. And this is a league that is getting faster and more highly skilled. And if you can't keep up, you are in trouble. And I think I was very critical of him in the playoffs last year. I think he looked awful in the bubble. And that's something that's not going to get any better. His foot speed is not going to get better at 43 years old. So in a sense, I certainly understand why the team wanted to move on and why the team wanted to go in a younger direction. But at the same time, as a fan, it sucks so bad to think about Zdeno Chara not being here. And I'm not a fan of the way the Bruins handled this personally, with dragging this on for as long as they did. If they wanted to go in a different direction, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But for you to drag this out all off season long, and like you could have told Chara right at the beginning of the off season, we want to go younger. Your speed isn't there anymore. We want to give these young kids a shot. tell him that as soon as free agency opens. October 9th, free agency opens, you go to Chara and say, we're going in a different direction. The fact that they dragged this out until the end of December and kind of had him in this limbo for so long, that kind of really ticks me off. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, not only was he a great player for Boston, he was your team captain. So to
Mm-hmm.
have your team captain in limbo for that long, I think they mishandled the situation for sure. I'm not happy that he signed with the Capitals, but I'm happy that he was able to find a place where he could compete on such short notice, quite frankly. It's a 1 year deal with Washington, and I think he'll be a great asset to that locker room. You have Ovechkin, you have Chara, you have players that can score, and players that are fast, and players that are veterans who know what it takes to get the locker room going. And the thing with Chara in Washington is that he doesn't really need to be that even captain guy. Just his veteran
Mm-hmm.
presence should be able to help Washington quite a bit. But like you said, I wasn't a fan of how they dragged this on. You know, you could have definitely, I don't know what went on behind the scenes, but it didn't look good from the public eye.
Mm-hmm.
And me and you being writing majors and communications majors, we learned a little bit about public relations,
Oh
and
yeah,
this was a public relations fail in my opinion.
I
And
agree.
I'll just add to this in general. It's been a rough year. Tom Brady, Mookie Betts, Zdeno Chara.
Yeah.
It's a new era in Boston sports, and I think it's going to be the one that our parents grew up with now, and not the one that we're used to, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's where it seems like it could be heading, unfortunately. But another thing as far as Chara goes is, did you want him back? Did you want him back, or did you want the team to go in a younger direction and try something else?
I wanted the team. I didn't want him back because of the fact that he looked slow on the ice. I do think that we needed to get younger, because like I said, in the Toronto series last year, I really started noticing where their speed was used to kind of just skate by Chara. And in that sense, he was just kind of chasing after them. He wasn't an effective defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like you said, I did notice in the bubble this year, he was very slow. He did offer that physical presence, but the opposing team had to do, all Tampa Bay had to do was skate to his side of the ice, and they knew that they could get by him and get a shot off. So, in that respect, I didn't want him back. That's no indication of what I feel about him as a person, or the fact that I don't like him. I loved him in a Bruins uniform. I just think it was time for the Bruins to get younger and faster, because we've seen several years now Tampa Bay has beaten us with their speed. Washington has beaten us with their speed. Even Chicago in 2013, before this was all even a thing, defeated us with their speed. And the Bruins have always kind of preached physicality and tough puck play, but honestly, at this point in the NHL, I would rather have a speed team full of scorers. And I know it's not the gritty hockey that we like, but we got to catch up and start beating the teams like Tampa Bay with speed.
Yeah, after the playoffs this past year, I was totally on board with them moving on from Chara. I was with you. I thought he was too slow. He played terrible in the postseason. He gets turned around all the time. He can't keep up. But the more I thought about it, I started to switch to, I did want them to bring him back, but in a reduced role.
Hmm.
He's not a top four defenseman anymore. If anyone watching, if you think Zdeno Chara is still a top four defenseman, you need to reevaluate how you look at hockey, because he's nowhere near a top four defenseman anymore. But he's still very good on the penalty kill. He's solid once he's in his own zone. Getting back to his own zone is the problem. But once he's in the zone, he's still
Yeah.
solid. He's got a huge reach with that stick. He takes up a lot of space, and he can still, in a depth role as a bottom pair guy or as an extra defenseman, he can still be a really valuable asset to a team, and I think he's going to be a valuable asset to Washington. They're not going to play him 20 minutes a night. Zdeno Chara should not be playing 20 minutes a night anymore in the NHL. But if you play him 14 to 15 minutes, with 4 of those minutes being on the penalty kill, he still has a lot of value in a lineup, I think. And
Yeah.
what really made me shift over the past, since finding out that he's leaving, what really made me shift is thinking that Boston hasn't added to this defense at all this offseason. Krug's gone, so now you lose your top 2 left side defensemen from last season are now no longer here. I feel like they should have brought him back on a 1-year cheap deal, just like what he got from Washington, and just have him as a depth guy. You don't have to play him every night. You don't have to play him 20 minutes a game. But as a bottom pair guy, just to have more depth on that lineup, I think it would have been smart for them to bring him back. And as much as I didn't want him back right when the playoffs ended, as the offseason went on and I saw Boston not adding to this decor, it really made me kind of want him back in a reduced depth role.
Yeah, and we were talking about this off the show last night. It's going to be up to Zaboral and Vekinen to be able to step up, and it's not like they eased them into this role. They're going to get a crash course very quickly on NHL hockey, and it's going to come with some growing pains. I think they'll be decent, but we're going to really see rookies make rookie mistakes, which may be frustrating some, but there was no grace period of easing the younger defensemen in either, which is why I maybe would have kept Chara around to help mentor them and teach them the ropes a little bit. So I wonder how that's going to play out moving forward, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was the next thing I wanted to get into with this whole Chara topic is now that he's gone and now that Krug's gone, what are we looking at here on the depth side of that defense core? John Moore is now in your top 4. Like that sounds gross just to say.
Yes.
John Moore is now in your top 4 next to Brandon Carlo on the left side. Like, just thoughts on that? Like,
we're going to have to score a lot of goals, and we're going to have to make sure to keep Tuukka Rask or whoever's in net protected, because I think it's going to be a long year. You talk about John Moore. John Moore is a depth piece.
yes.
Brandon Carlo is good, but he can't do it all by himself. And I don't know. Defense was it wasn't a problem, but there were some cracks when Krug and Chara were here. Now there's a huge gaping hole and leak everywhere. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's gonna be interesting to see. I don't know. I want to say maybe addition by subtraction, but it's not even that. It's subtraction by subtraction.
Yeah, I mean, even as much as Chara slowed down, I think the Bruins defense looks worse without him than if they had brought him back. And I mean, you're relying heavily now on some of those young guys that we just don't know. I mean, Lauzon played a decent number of games this past season, and he looked okay, like a bottom pair guy, but he's not a guy I would want in a super high role. And then you've got Zaboral and Vakanainen, who are completely unproven at the NHL level. They're both AHL defensemen to this point, and we have no idea what they're going to look like if they have to play a regular shift in the NHL. So there's a lot of question marks on that Bruins defense now, and there's very little depth on that Bruins defense now. And I think that could be an even bigger issue, not so much turning to the young guys, but the fact that they have virtually no depth on the back end now.
Yeah, and I've said before, I haven't really approved of Don Sweeney's drafting because some of these players can't make it out of Providence. Now they're going to make it out of Providence, and now we're going to be able to see what they can do.
Yeah, they're going to make it out of Providence because they're forced out of Providence with what's happening. I'm concerned, honestly, about this defense. And that brings me to a question. Do you think they're going to add? There's been a lot of talks about them possibly going after a left shot free agent defenseman, maybe bring in a veteran guy on a PTO like an Andy Green, who actually played really well for the Islanders in the playoffs this past year. Do you think they make an addition now that they know Char is not coming back? maybe on whether it's a PTO or whether it's a low cost free agent?
I want to say I think they will, but I always hear these rumors about the Bruins. Oh, they're going after this. Oh, they're going after this guy, and then it never happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I will have to say that throughout these past couple of years, I've remembered more of the Bruins' departures than their signings. So I don't have faith that they'll add anybody. If they do, that's great. But I think for the most part, what we see is what we're going to get for this Bruins team.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning that way. I'd love to see them bring someone in,
Oh
even
yes.
if it's just like a Ben Hutton, who
Yep.
he's not a big name player. He had a pretty decent year last year with the Kings. He had 16 points in 65 games and was actually a plus player on a team that was not very good in LA. He's not a guy that's going to play in your top pair or anything like that, but he'd help the depth issue, and he would at least be another NHL body there where you're not relying so much on guys who are pretty much standard AHL players who are going to have to make that jump this coming season. So I feel like a Hutton would be a solid move. Or even, like I said, a PTO for a guy like Andy Green, who 38 years old now, I believe, but he on a 1 year deal. He played really well for the Islanders in the postseason last year. I just feel like you have to add some sort of depth to that back end.
Yeah, I feel like that too. And you said Andy Green was 38. At least he'd be a veteran. Right now,
Yeah,
we're looking at a bunch of young players, but I don't know. It was just frustrating to watch all these teams make moves and the Bruins do absolutely nothing. I understand they have cap problems, and I understand, money doesn't grow on trees, but a bunch of teams got better this offseason, and the Bruins, at least for right now, looks like they got significantly worse, honestly.
yeah, and that's going to be a problem with I want to talk more about this later in the show, but that's going to be a particularly an issue with the new divisional alignment and the fact that
Yep.
the Bruins are in the group of death of the NHL
Yes.
basically with that East Division,
Yes.
which looks downright nasty. We'll get more into the divisions later on in this, but this was not the offseason for the Bruins to get worse, to say the least.
No.
It's gonna be difficult. So now I want to talk a little bit about the moves that they did make. Obviously, the big loss before Chara, and the biggest loss of the offseason, certainly from a player standpoint, is Torrey Krug. Krug does not re-sign with the Bruins. He goes to the St. Louis Blues, gets $6.5 million per year from the Blues. You wonder, you think Boston could have given him that deal and made it work. But he decides to leave, so that's another obviously huge loss on the back end. Your best offensive defenseman by far, not even close. Um, I mean, we've talked a lot about Chara. How is that Krug loss gonna hurt Boston?
When I think of Torrey Krug, I think of what he was able to do on the power play. I'll use
Oh
a
yeah.
basketball analogy and say that he was kind of the point guard of the power play.
Mm-hmm.
For all his faults in terms of size defensively and the fact that people were concerned about that, he was a very good offensive defenseman on the power play. He moved very well with the puck, and he was very good at not turning it over in his own zone. And I think that's going to be a huge loss on the power play, particularly because he was kind of the conductor
Mm-hmm.
of that unit. At the time, I thought Torrey Krug got too much money, but now with the Bruins defensive core looking like it does,
Mm-hmm.
I would have paid him that at this point if we could see into the future, so to speak,
Yeah.
at the time the move was made.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you didn't want to overpay for Krug, but now hindsight's 2020 and you see what the decor looks like now. We are talking about a vastly different offseason for the Bruins if Torrey Krug is still in this lineup
Yep.
than what we are right now. And I don't think the loss of Chara, obviously emotionally it would still sting, and you don't want to see Chara playing in a different uniform, and there's so much emotional attachment to Zdeno Chara. But from a hockey standpoint, the loss of Chara would be almost nothing if Torrey Krug was back in this lineup.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that Krug. played with toughness, and I can
He could
I remember.
scrap.
Yeah, he
He
could.
could scrap for such a smaller guy. I love Torrey Krug. I mean, he was one of my favorite guys.
He could, and he could also put up goals in bunches. I remember the series against the New York Rangers in 2013
Hmm.
where he kind of really broke out, and
That
I
was
was
his coming
amazed.
out party, yeah.
Yeah, I was amazed at how, efficient he looked, and how, quick he looked with the puck, and his, wrist shot was extremely fast, and it was great to see. But, for all his faults defensively, I'll just go back to this. He was a good offensive defenseman, especially on the power play. And having Krug back in this lineup would have kind of at least added a core piece to the Bruins defensive unit with Chara gone.
Hmm.
Now it's kind of like, who is the next core piece and who is going to step up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be Matt Grzelcyk. I think there's a lot of pressure now on Matt Grzelcyk on that left side. He goes from your third pair left defense to your top pair left defense now, playing with most likely Charlie McAvoy. And this team has gone younger, and we know that McAvoy and Carlo are kind of they're the core of this team now defensively. Grzelcyk, I think, is going to step into a core role this year as well, and he's going to have to. He's going to take over power play duties. He's going to be him and McAvoy are going to be your top offensive defensemen. There's a lot of pressure on Matt Grzelcyk, and I'm really interested to see how he steps into that role and does he rise to that occasion like we've seen certain guys in the past. I mean, when you remember like Krug did when he first came into the league, he rose to that occasion. And I think Carlo's a guy who's risen to the occasion over the past 2-3 years where he's become a legitimate shutdown defenseman. Grizzlick's going to have to take that next step next season. Do you think he can do that, or what are your thoughts on Grizz?
I think he can. I think we'll be able to get to have a really good chance to see what he can do now. I watched
Hmm.
him a lot at Boston University,
Yep.
and he always played tough and he always played hard. Granted, college hockey and the pros are like apples and oranges, but um, speaking of which, now with Carlo, McAvoy, and Grizz, don't you have an all Hockey East defensive pairing? Didn't Carlo go to Providence?
No, Carlo played juniors.
Oh, it's juniors.
Carlos
Who am
played
I thinking of?
juniors,
I
but
was thinking of just
McAvoy and Grizzlick are
he
both
did.
from BU. So you've got a BU top pair on D now.
I'm very interested to see what he can do. You talk about players who need to step up and kind of shine in the spotlight. For all the losses, now it's certain players' chances to really make a name for themselves and really show Bruce Cassidy and the coaching staff that they can, compete at a high level, and not only compete at a high level, but hopefully help sustain the Bruins production as a team that has gotten them to the playoffs in the past couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. So one guy that they were able to keep and did stick around was Jake DeBrusk. DeBrusk signs a bridge deal, couple years, was 3.675 million or something like that. I don't remember that might be the exact number. I'm not 100% on that, but it was under 4 million per year. DeBrusk was an important guy, I think, to bring back, just because he's still young. He's 24 years old, and a guy who is really important to this team from a scoring standpoint because they've been heavily reliant on that top line of Marchand, Bergeron, and Pastrnak to do pretty much all of the offense for this team. And we've seen, Krejci have good stretches. We've seen DeBrusk have good stretches, and they've gotten secondary scoring at times. But I think it stood out in the playoffs more than anything else this past year, this summer. If that top line didn't score, the Bruins were scoring one goal if they were lucky.
Yeah.
So they bring back DeBrusk, who really needs to have a better season than what he did last year and get back to that 2018-19 form and hopefully be even better than that. I think it's a solid contract. It's a bridge deal. They didn't commit to him long term because I still think we need to see more scoring and before we can commit long term to a guy like DeBrusk. Um, well, under 4 million, I think is a pretty solid cap hit for a guy that could give you 25 goals. Just your thoughts on DeBrusk and him coming back.
I like DeBrusk a lot. I thought I thought he played okay in stretches last year. I thought in the playoffs he was kind of absent, but in
Hmm.
a normal regular season like 2018, 2019, he played well. He scored goals, and he also provided that kind of secondary scoring in the
Hmm.
regular season. It
Yep.
seems like whenever the Bruins get to the playoffs, the top line has to do all the
Everything.
work,
Yep.
and then that doesn't lead to success. And you mentioned Krejci. Krejci's not getting any younger either. You talk about Marchand and Bergeron. They're aging.
Yep.
Krejci's aging. Pasternak is still young, but he has been dealing with injuries. We saw last playoffs his thumb, I believe it was. He plays hard and he plays physically, so you kind of sort of expect some wear and tear from Pasta by the time the season, um, gets to the playoffs. But
Hmm.
I think for DeBrusque, it's going to be important that he really kind of improves
Yeah.
and not only score goals, but score goals consistently. I like when he scores, at a high rate, but it seems like he would score 2 games in a row and then be absent for 2 games with nothing in the stat sheet. I need to see goals with 2 games in a row and then maybe an assist and just him consistently being around the puck and being, a sharp shooter, or else it could be a long year for the top line again.
Yeah, you just brought something up that I was going to make a point about Jake DeBrusk. My biggest issue with DeBrusk has been consistency. Like the tools are there with Jake DeBrusk. The talent is there, the work ethic is there, the ability is there for him to be a legitimate top six, 30 goal, 60-point scorer in the NHL. But he's been so inconsistent throughout most of his career where he'll go through stretches where he'll have a really good week and he'll have 3 goals and 5 points in a 3 or 4 game stretch, and then he'll disappear for 2 weeks and he doesn't get on the score sheet and you just don't even notice him, and then he comes back and has another big week and scores another 3 goals, and then he'll disappear again. And one of the biggest things I want to see improved from Jake DeBrusk is his consistency. I want to notice him on the ice and on the score sheet on a much more regular basis to where he's contributing almost night in and night out for this team rather than just having hot stretches and then going cold for a while.
Right. Absolutely. And I think it's going to be important, you know, definitely during the regular season, but come the playoffs, I think this core that the Bruins have is not getting any younger, and I think DeBrusk really needs to kind of take the reins in the scoring department for them, and play at a high level and show that he can continue to consistently play at a high level because, like you said, the talent is there, the skills are there. Now he just has to be able to put it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. And one guy that I think he is going to be greatly benefited from adding to this team. It's definitely the Bruins' biggest addition this offseason, who I want to get into next. It's Craig Smith coming in from the Nashville Predators in free agency. And I absolutely loved this move for the Boston Bruins for so many different reasons. One, secondary scoring being such a big issue. This is such a boost to your secondary scoring in Boston. A guy who consistently puts up around 20 goals every year. You can move up and down the lineup. He's a very versatile player. You could play him on the top line. You could play him on the fourth line. Doesn't matter to him. He's going to produce. He plays both wings as well. He's primarily a right wing, but he can always switch over to the left side as well if you need him to. I'm a huge fan of Craig Smith. He's a very consistent player, which I think is going to help Jake DeBrusk a lot. Just your thoughts on the Smith signing and having him added to this Bruins lineup.
I really really liked this signing when it happened. You're talking about a guy that had 31 points last year in 69 games played, and when you take a look at his statistics, just from the 2017-18 season on, he had 51 points, 38 points, and 31 points. So it's not like he scored 2 points one year and then he exploded for 31. This is a guy that can, score with consistency, and he's not going to be a 50 goal scorer, but you don't need to have a 50 goal scorer when you're talking about depth scoring.
Mm-hmm.
You can get away with 31 points and have that be a very, viable, option for Jake DeBrusk, and guys like that who may need some help. And I really liked this just because of his consistency and his ability to stay healthy too the past couple of years. He played in 78 games in 2018, 2019, 79 games, then 78 games, and then the full 82 the other 2 years prior. So this is a guy that is healthy, can score, and has some veteran experience that should be able to help the Bruins a lot, especially when we're talking about secondary scoring.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Craig Smith is just such a great middle of your lineup winger. Again, so versatile and can play in so many different situations for you. I just pulled up his goal totals. This He's so consistent.
Mm-hmm.
24 dating all the way back to 2013-14. 24 goals, 23 goals, 21 goals. He had a really bad year in 2016-17. He only had 12 goals. That was a one-off, though, because he came back in 2017-18 and scored 25. Then he scored 21 in 18-19. And then last season, which was a shortened season, he scored 18 for them on
Yep.
a really offensively challenged Predators team last year. He was tied for second on the team in goals. And if that had been a full season, he would have gone over 20 again. So this guy is a model of consistency. He's had 5 20-goal seasons in the past 7 years. It would have been 6 if last season didn't get cut short. Um, I cannot speak highly enough of this Craig Smith signing for the Bruins and what he adds to this lineup on the wing to just bring in some secondary scoring help. I think is going to be a massive benefit to this team.
And when you take a look at just his statistics, even before the National Hockey League,
Hmm.
it seems like he's always involved in the play. He had um, 33 points for the University of Wisconsin in the 2009-2010 season, which was a very good Wisconsin team.
Yep.
And then he had 43 points the year after. So it seems like he's always, staying with the puck, trying to find where the puck is, willing to, get involved in plays and willing to make things happen. And that's exactly what you want, especially on a Bruins offense that relies so much on getting into the zone and trying to find the good shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you can play him with Krejci, you can play him with Coyle, you could play him with Bergeron, and that's one other thing with Smith in that signing. Pastrnak and Marchand are both going to miss the beginning of the season. They've had off-season surgeries. Pastrnak seems like he might be out a little bit longer than Marchand. Marchand should hopefully be back in a somewhat timely manner, where Pastrnak looks like he could miss, at least a month, if not more, of this coming season. So to have a guy like Smith, who may have to start the season on the top line with Patrice Bergeron, that's huge, because if you didn't have him there, who's playing on that top line with Marchand and Pastrnak both out to start the year? Like, you're in trouble without a depth guy like that. And then when Pastrnak does come back, you can pump him right back down and play him on the third line with Coyle, and he's going to produce just about the same as he would. Like, he's so consistent. So I think that's big for the Bruins, knowing that they're going to be missing some top wingers to start the year.
Yeah, 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 definitely. And you talk about the subtractions that the Bruins have had this offseason. That type of versatility, even though we're talking about two different positions,
Mm-hmm.
is something that you want to see in a player. I think Smith, like you said, he would be able to be paired on several different lines, and he'll
Mm-hmm.
be able to kind of fill in the gap left by Pasternak. I'm not saying he's going to be the next Pasternak because that's impossible.
No.
Pasternak's a player, but he will be able to kind of maybe stop the bleeding of
Yeah.
having Pasternak out, which is going to be huge.
I think that's the perfect way to put it, is that he's a guy who can stop the bleeding while you wait for Pastrnak to come back and their other, top scorers along with Marchand like that. Um, Moving on now, I want to talk about some moves that the Bruins didn't make but were rumored to be in on. The first one, and probably one of the biggest one, was Mike Hoffman. So we know now that Mike Hoffman is going to St. Louis. There's a deal in place there. He can't officially sign it yet because of the cap situation. The Blues have to wait until they get Alex Steen and Vlad Tarasenko on LTIR before they can officially sign the deal. So he's going to Blues camp on a PTO. so he doesn't miss training camp. But he's going to be a St. Louis Blue. The deal is there. The Bruins were one of the teams rumored to be in on Hoffman. Was that a guy that you would have wanted the Bruins to go after, or just your thoughts on Hoffman and the potential of him coming here to Bruins and the fact that he didn't actually end up coming to Boston?
Um, you know, I thought he played very well for Florida on what was kind of not a bad Florida team, but a very middle of the road Florida
Mm-hmm.
team. He would have definitely have been able to provide some scoring. He had 70 points in 2018, 2019, and then 59 points in 69 games. And I thought that he would have been able to add secondary scoring for the Bruins. He is a bigger name than some of the other free agents that we have signed. So in that respect, I kind of wanted the Bruins to get a big fish, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. It
Yeah.
seems like they always fill up their roster with third line depth players, but yeah, I would have liked Mike Hoffman. He's got a track record of success. He had 59 points in 2015, 2016, 61 the year after, and then 56, 70, and 59. So he's not like a 30-point guy. He's a guy that can consistently put up points, and he's right in the prime of his career right now. He's 31 years old, and so he would have been a good veteran piece, especially again, and I hate to refer back to this, with the subtractions in the locker room of Torrey Krug and Zdeno Chara. You talk about youth movement, but you also definitely need some veterans. And don't get me wrong, there are veterans on the roster, but this is a guy that has, been in the league for a long time and has been able to, kind of perform consistently. So I definitely would have liked Mike Hoffman, but St. Louis had a great offseason, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, despite losing Petrangelo, I believe it was,
Yep.
they managed to fill the holes in nicely, given what they had to work with.
Yeah. I personally was very conflicted on Hoffman because the offense is obviously there. This guy puts up big time points, he scores goals, and I feel like he really could have been a nice addition to this team offensively. And really, especially knowing that Pastrnak and Marchand again are going to be out to start the year, he really would have helped stop the bleeding with having those guys out and been able to supply some really good goal scoring to this team. But then the more I thought about it and the more I dug into Mike Hoffman and started to look deeper at him, my want for him started to certainly decline because his defensive metrics are atrocious. Um, and there's been some talk of locker room issues going along with Hoffman as well. He's
I
kind
remember
of a
this.
me
Yeah.
first player.
Mhm.
There's been people saying that he cares more about his stats and how many goals he scores as opposed to the team's success, and he's not overly well liked around the league by a few different sources that I've heard. There are some teammates that haven't had great relationships with Hoffman, and there are some league executives who kind of want to steer clear of Mike Hoffman because of some locker room issues. Now, Boston has a strong enough veteran core, I think, particularly the Bergeron and Krejci, where I think they could probably quell that and be like, hey, we're not putting up with your garbage here. Like, if you're going to be a problem, we'll ship you out as fast as we brought you in. But looking at his defense, looking at him as an overall player, it made me kind of say, maybe he's not a great fit. And then hearing about the locker room stuff, it's certainly more, kind of pushed me away from Hoffman a little bit. But there's no doubt if you can add a guy who can score 30 goals into your lineup, that'd be a big benefit offensively.
Not that this excuses the locker room stuff, but I didn't hear much when he was in Florida. I heard a lot when he was in Ottawa.
And
So maybe,
Ottawa was
yeah,
such a train wreck when he was there too.
yes. So maybe he kind of cleaned up his act a little bit. Like you said, a good veteran presence in the Bruins locker room is still there. But, you know, I mean, you bring up some good points. His defense,
Oh, it's
he's
so
a great
bad.
offensive player, but his defense
He's
leaves a lot to
so
be
bad.
desired. And we definitely need defense right now. And so, um, you know, I would have liked him for the offensive output. I'm an offensive guy. I don't
Hmm.
really care about defense. I like the pretty goals and the hat tricks and all that. But when you're in the middle of a hockey game, you need defense, and that's where I think Hoffman, like you said, would fail.
Yeah, and another guy, another move that there were a lot of rumors going around on the trade market about the Bruins potentially making a deal for Noah Hannafin from the Calgary Flames. Now, obviously, this isn't something that's come to fruition, and I really don't think it's even close to ever happening. But it was something that was talked about a lot. Was Noah Hannafin potentially coming to Boston? And I don't know what that trade would have looked like. I mean, to pull a young defenseman out, or a young right shot defenseman out of anywhere, is going to cost you. And I feel like the cost would have, no matter what the deal ended up looking like, the cost was going to outweigh the gains there for the Bruins. So I personally was not in on Noah Hannafin. I've actually been very disappointed in him at the NHL level. Boston College kid, was a great defenseman in college, but a lot of red flags at the NHL. Has never lived up to his draft position, has never lived up to the hype. I was personally out on Hannafin. I did not want Boston to even entertain that, especially if a guy like Carlo was going back the other way. That was just a no thanks from the get-go from me. But what are your thoughts on Hannafin, and was that a deal you would have been interested in seeing the Bruins explore?
For the right price, yes, but you're talking about like you said, a young defenseman, and that would have cost Boston. And just looking at his stats, they aren't really eye popping. And in 80 games in 2018 and 2019, he had 33 points, 5 goals, and 28 assists. And so I would have, for the right price, I would have liked Boston to explore that. But he's kind of disappeared at the NHL level. At
Mm-hmm.
Boston College, he was so notable because he played hard and he was on a team with so many great stars, but sometimes that doesn't translate to the NHL level. And college defense is a lot, I don't want to say easier, but there's a lot more room for error
Mm-hmm.
because the skill gap isn't as great, especially when you're talking about Hockey East. I feel like a lot of teams are competitive there. But when you talk about the NHL level, you can easily get exploited and your weaknesses can be shown. And I think the Bruins, I would have liked him in Boston, but for the right price, and I think the Bruins would have had to give up to give up too much
Yeah.
in order to get him. So
Yeah, so I was wrong. Hannafin's a left shot. He's not a right shot. But still, a 23-year-old defenseman is not going to come cheap. And that was my issue um, with the whole trade rumor thing, was like whatever the cost was to get Hannafin was going to be way too much. And it was going to end up being a bad trade for the Bruins. And to me, Hannafin, I mean, his career high in points at the NHL level is 33. He was drafted 5th overall. He was supposed to be a franchise defenseman when the Carolina Hurricanes drafted him, and Carolina gave up on him after just 3 years. And that to me is a big red flag. The fact that Carolina gave up on him after 3 years, they saw something that they were like, "Nope, if we're going to get rid of him while we can get something." And the fact that Calgary now apparently has him on the block and wants to move on from him, if you've gone through that, if you're on the block that much as a 23-year-old, like that's a huge red flag for me.
I would kick the tires just to see what the asking price is. I wouldn't get a deal done,
Hmm.
but if he's already on the trading block with Calgary and he's already been in a stint with Carolina, then maybe he wouldn't require as much in a trade as say 4 years ago. But
Hmm.
I have to say his story sounds a lot like Dougie Hamilton's. Honestly, a guy that was picked very high in the draft, and he just hasn't been able to live up to the expectations either. Um, I think he's kind of soft. I don't know if you can say that on
I
a show.
agree with that.
I think he's kind of soft, and he was projected like Hannafin to be a very good player, and he just hasn't been able to live up to expectations. So the Bruins might as well dodge a bullet in that case and not repeat the Dougie Hamilton mistake.
Well, it's funny you bring up Dougie Hamilton for two reasons. One, Hamilton was who Hannafin got traded for when he went from Carolina to Calgary, so that is funny. And
Right.
the other thing is that Noah Hannafin could be on the same career trajectory as a guy like Dougie Hamilton, whereas Hamilton has really blossomed over the past two seasons. The last couple years, obviously, he got hurt last year and missed a lot of time. But before he got injured last season, he was in the Norris Trophy conversation. Like Hamilton struggled a lot early in his career. Obviously, didn't fit well with the Bruins. Didn't have a great stint in Calgary. But then once he got to Carolina, Hamilton really picked it up. And that makes me wonder. Hannah Finn started with Carolina, didn't have a great, they moved on from him pretty easily. They didn't want to keep him around. He was kind of the odd man out. Goes to Calgary, hasn't been great in Calgary. That he's already back on the trading block. He seems like the odd man out with the Flames now. But when Dougie Hamilton went to his third team, he all of a sudden kicked it on. And whether it was a development issue, whether it was just him getting older and more mature, over the last couple years, Dougie Hamilton has become a significantly better defenseman than what he was early in his career. I
Yeah.
still think he's soft. I don't think he's a hard-nosed, physical player who you're going to win with really in the playoffs. But he's a guy who's become a legitimate top pair defenseman. And I wonder if maybe Hamilton, if he goes to a third team, or not Hamilton, Hannafin, excuse me, can do kind of the same thing that Hamilton has done and kicked it into gear with that third team.
I hope so because I like seeing local kids succeed. So I hope he can. I mean, if you go to Boston College to play hockey, there's something there.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
so hopefully he can maybe a new change of scenery will do him well, and hopefully he can kind of pick up his production and make a better career and kind of follow that same path that you just talked about with Hamilton. Because the Dougie Hamilton I remember was not good,
Hmm.
but now he's kind of found his niche in the NHL a little bit better than he did in the first couple seasons, and I think Hannafin can do that as well.
Yeah, I'm certainly rooting for the kid. I mean, we're New England guys, we're Massachusetts kids, so
In case you
when
couldn't tell.
anyone that comes out of the local schools and from Hockey East, we want to root for and see do well.
Absolutely.
And Hannafin's one of those guys. I mean, I've been very critical of him in his NHL career because I don't think he's lived up to being a number 5 pick. But I'm rooting for the kid, and I hope that he can get his career turned around. And still, defensemen take longer to develop than forwards do, and he's only 23, so it's not like it's the end of the line here for Noah Hannafin.
Right.
If he has a big bounce back season, he could really get his career on track to become that top end defenseman that he was drafted to be.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, he's 23. He's still got a lot of room to grow.
Hmm.
And some people may say, "Oh, third team, he's destined to be a bust," but his age works in his favor here. So for that reason, I think he definitely could, turn things around.
Okay, so we've talked about the offseason. We've talked about the moves that they did make, the big guys they brought in, the guys they lost, the moves that they didn't make with Hoffman or Hannafin. Now I want to look ahead to the upcoming season a little bit. The new year coming. Bruins' first game is January 14th. Season starts January 13th. Totally realigned divisions. 56 games, totally different kind of season just because of the pandemic and everything going on. The leagues had to change a lot of things for this year just to get a season to happen. Um, just talk the Bruins' new division. I guess we'll start there. The East Division, which is a lot of teams from the Metro, and then Boston and Buffalo moving from the Atlantic to the East Division, while the Canadian teams go and play in their own division up north. The East Division looks like an absolute group of death. I mean, you've got Philadelphia, Washington, both New York teams, the Rangers and the Islanders. You have Boston, you have Pittsburgh, you have, and then Buffalo and New Jersey certainly look like they're going to be the bottom of this division. But just how well do you think Boston can compete with the lineup that they have now and what they're going into this new year with? How well do you think they can compete against really high-end competition like what they're going to see in this division?
I'm going to be honest. I have my questions about whether they will be able to consistently compete in this division. You look at the teams, Buffalo and New Jersey, like you said, will probably be at the bottom, but you have it all in this division. You have the physicality of Philadelphia. You have the finesse of Pittsburgh. You have the veteran experience of Washington. Uh, this really is the group of death. I'm looking at the other divisions, and you know, some of like to the NHL's credit, there is not a bad division in this group. For what they did, there is not a bad division in this group.
And it's
But
all
like,
geographic too.
yeah, which I actually kind of like. And but the
Well,
NHL did the Bruins no favors here.
yeah, well, I think when you look at it, I think the Canadian division is going to be incredibly fun to watch this year because you've got 5 or 6 playoff level teams in that division. I mean, Ottawa probably not, but the other 6 teams in that Canadian division are all could be playoff level teams, and only 4 of them are getting in. So you're leaving 2 on the outside looking in there. And the East Division, those two look like the really, really good divisions. And then when you look at the Central and the West, I think you're more top heavy in those divisions. The Central is going to be an interesting race for the playoffs, but they've got Detroit and Chicago sitting at the bottom there. And the West Division, I think, is the worst. You obviously have Colorado, St. Louis, and Vegas, who are 3 powerhouse teams at the top of that division. But after you get past those 3, you've got a load of junk in that West Division beyond those top 3. But man, like the divisional alignments, I think are really cool. All the games are going to be within the same division, so you're playing the same teams over and over, which I'm a huge
I
fan
like
of.
that. Yeah, I
I'm a
like.
huge fan of that. Um, just because it builds these rivalries between these teams that when you go back to the old days of the NHL when Boston was playing their division rivals 7-8 times a year in a normal season, and then recently with expansion and with the whole thing about trying to get every team in every building every year, you play a lot of cross conference games now, which to me are I don't need to
Yeah.
see I don't need to see the California teams twice. Boston doesn't have a rivalry with those teams. Like those games aren't as exciting. I'd rather see the Maple Leafs or I'd rather see the Flyers or I'd rather see the Rangers more and see those teams less personally. Um, but Boston's got a very tough division. They've got a very tough schedule. I guess it's good Tampa's not there with us. Tampa gets to go harass the Central teams now. Um, but man, I definitely think it's going to be tough on the Bruins. I mean, this is going to be a dogfight division to say the least, trying to get into the top 4 and make the playoffs.
Yeah, and you know, I'm just looking at all these teams: Pittsburgh, Washington, Philadelphia. I mean, there are opportunities to create rivalries here. Obviously, you have Boston and Philadelphia,
Bring
Boston,
that
Pittsburgh,
back.
yeah, and then Boston and Washington, especially due to the fact that the Bruins can't seem to beat Washington.
Hmm.
But
And the
no,
Rangers too. I think this is a
yeah,
huge opportunity to bring back an original 6 rivalry that's kind of faded in recent history with the New York Rangers.
I'm excited to see New Jersey too because they do have a lot of young players with a lot of potential.
Hmm.
The execution wasn't there last year, but I am excited to see some of the younger players a lot, you know, over the course of these next couple months. And then you take a look at the star power, like you said, in the North Division, you have Connor McDavid and Johnny Gaudreau and uh,
Austin Matthews.
Brock Besser, Austin Matthews. And so it's going to be interesting to see all these teams kind of collide geographically. And I think it's going to make for some fun times come the playoffs. And to be honest with you, we may have avoided Tampa Bay by them being in the Central Division, but something tells me that we're going to be seeing them in the postseason and they may give us a run for our money again.
Well, yeah, I mean, if Boston makes it that far, so
Yeah.
you would have to make the Final Four to see a team from a different division, which again I think is really cool. The way that they're doing it, where you're basically going to play within your division all regular season, and then through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs until one team comes out of that division, and then they'll play finally someone from a different division, and then we'll see how the Cup final shakes out. Again, I obviously you'd want a little more variety in the schedule in a normal season, but given the circumstances, um,
I'm
with the
happy we have a season.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We are extremely lucky to have a season. Given the circumstances, the NHL has done a tremendous job of grouping these teams where they're going to be fun, exciting games. They're all geographically, fairly close to each other. You're going to see a lot of rivalries built, um, and I think it's going to be a really fun season of hockey to watch.
I do too, and hopefully with these geographical divisions, fans who weren't normally interested in the game of hockey can really, start to become interested. And I feel like hockey is very underappreciated in terms of the four major sports.
Hmm.
So hopefully, these geographical and the proximity to each other will be able to engage some new fans as well. Because for those who don't watch hockey, you're missing out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hockey's been my favorite sport my whole life. I know you're a big football guy and you're big into sports in general, but I mean, as hockey's got to be up there as far as
Yeah.
favorite sports.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I just love all the action and the physicality, and or what used to be the physicality anyway. And
Well,
uh,
I mean, yeah, I'm as big of a physical guy as there is. I'm all about old time hockey, and but I feel like some of it is over. How much physicality the NHL has lost, I think, is a little bit overplayed in some circles. Like the playoffs last year were very physical. Um, like there were big hits. There were a decent amount of fights. There were a lot more fights in the postseason last year than I was expecting, and I feel like hockey still does have that physicality and that grit. Certainly, it's not like it was 10, 20 years ago, but it's still there. It's still there. It's not completely gone yet.
yeah, and for all the lack of physicality that I complain about, I'm amazed at the puck handling skills that these skaters have in the dekes, and how quickly they can pass and how fast their shots are. So for what the NHL has maybe or maybe not lost in physicality, they make up for with just some absolutely beautiful plays that make me
Hmm.
tired just watching. I'm very happy just sitting on my couch and letting these guys do the work.
Yeah, the skill in the league right now is unmatched. It's never been this skilled before. And that's something that just continues to grow is the level of skill in this league. And I wish the league was more physical. I'm an old school, old time hockey fan. I like physical, nasty rivalry hockey. And I think that's why I'm so excited for this season and all these divisional games because these teams are going to absolutely hate each other. And I think there's going to be a lot of bad blood this year just
Yeah.
because of the familiarity and playing these teams over and over and over again. And I really want that to come back more in the NHL. Just my point is if you talk to some people, particularly like me who like the old time game, they'll talk like the NHL is non contact at this point. And it hasn't gotten that bad. I don't think it's gotten that bad. I wish it was more physical, but it's not. It's not to the point where there's no fights left or there's no hitting left. It's still a physical, fun game to watch.
And the same people that say that the NHL is no contact and there's no hitting, they look for the big time headline making plays. They're not watching necessarily, the movements with the puck or how fast these guys are skating. Because honestly, I find in sports nowadays a lot of people just want the flashy stuff and they don't appreciate the intricacies of the
Yep.
games. So
Yeah.
I'm getting off my soapbox now, but yeah.
Yeah. No. No. Yeah. No. That's. I mean, that's what we're here for to talk and chat about this stuff. And one last thing with regards to this coming season and the schedule that I wanted to touch on was the almost baseball style sets against teams now, which I think makes a lot of sense. And I almost want the league to go to this in a normal season. I almost would like to see this just all as the future schedule wise of the NHL, where you go to a city when you're on the road and you play that team multiple times, where we see a lot of 2-game sets this year, some decent amount of 3, and then some even 4 and 5 times. I don't know if this is the only 5-game set, but I know that Anaheim and LA towards the end of the season play each other 5 games in a row. It's
Wow.
almost like a mini playoff series within the regular season. I love this, like the 2-3 game sets against teams where you're playing the same team multiple games in a row, and then you're on to the next city and go play another team for a set. It's very baseball like with the multiple games and not just hopping city to city night after night. Just your thoughts on that, and is that something you're looking forward to?
Yeah, because when you look at a rivalry like the Red Sox and Yankees, they play each other 18 times a year or something
Yeah.
crazy. And, that's how the bad blood is created, and that's how, fans really get engaged and get to know the opposing players' names and get to develop a hatred for the
Hmm.
opposing players and banter about the rivalry. So it's going to be great. I would love the NHL to continue this moving forward because the NHL is probably the only league where you could play Buffalo and the Rangers on 2 nights and then fly to Phoenix to play the Coyotes, and
Yeah.
there's no real rivalry there. There's just disruption within the schedule. So
Hmm.
I like the continuity and I like the consistency because I think it will, get some of the rivalries back in the NHL moving forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, imagine in a normal 82 game season, we have playing 3 straight games against the Montreal Canadiens. Like, tell me there's a Bruins or Canadiens fan out there who wouldn't love that.
I would love that absolutely. I
Like,
would love that absolutely.
do like a Saturday night Bruins Canadiens game, then play again on Monday night and play again on Wednesday night. You're playing the same team. Like, that would be absolutely incredible to have like a set against Montreal or a set against Toronto or a set against Buffalo during the season like that. It'd be like a mini playoff series within the season. I love this schedule with the way that it's worked out this year.
And depending upon, let's just say this was a normal year, and we played Toronto 3 times, you could pick up enough film to understand the tendencies of the team in full, so that come playoff time, for
Hmm.
instance, these teams would be more prepared for each other, and Boston could maybe do something to mitigate Toronto's speed, or Toronto could do something to kind of take advantage of the Bruins penalty kill or something like that.
Hmm.
So I think it should be something that Gary Bettman should consider. Now, does Gary Bettman always consider the right things and make the common sense moves? No, but I think this idea definitely has legs to it for sure.
All right, awesome, man. And one last thing I know that you wanted to touch on, and I certainly do as well, just to wrap up the show here before we say goodbye to episode 1. Tuukka Rask.
Uh,
Um, we all know obviously what happened in the bubble last year, where he didn't opt out at first. He started the playoffs as the Bruins goaltender, and then after a couple games of the Carolina series, gone. Opts out, leaves the bubble. Now the reports are that he did have a sick child at home, and that's why I didn't want to harp on him
yeah.
too much right away, because we did not know the circumstances behind it. I know a lot of Bruins fans were furious that Rask quit on the team like that. Um, but once I've always said that it was his right to do so. That was part of the deal when the players came back, was that they could leave if they wanted to. And once you learned that he had a sick kid, you understood that he wanted to go home and his head wasn't in it. And the other side of that was, if his head wasn't in it, I didn't want him here anyway. Because if you're a goaltender, you are not going to be playing at the top of your game if you're not fully mentally invested into it. So if you have any distractions like that, I don't want you in the net anyway. So I never held it against him. I was okay with it, and Halak played well. I mean, I don't think it mattered who was in goal against Tampa Bay. The
No.
Lightning were going to
No.
light us up anyway.
Yes.
Um, so just your thoughts on Rask leaving and where you stand on that whole situation.
I have never been a fan of Tuukka Rask. Prior to this,
Mm-hmm.
prior to the bubble, I'll leave the bubble out of it because that's a family situation, and family's off limits in my opinion, so I won't
Yep.
touch on that. But I was just never a Tuukka Rask fan because I always thought he was very weak mentally in terms of, for instance, he went several years into his career before he played in a game against the Montreal Canadiens. And then he also didn't get the job done against Philadelphia in 2010.
Yep.
And the list can go on. I was never a fan of his. And for the record, and let this program show that John has always been a big Tuukka Rask fan. Him and I have talked about, and he goes, "Oh, it's the Vezinas and da 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 da." Da. Well, the Vezinas don't matter in the playoffs because other than that, he stinks. He fails. So I have never been a Rask fan. I certainly respect his decision to leave the bubble. I was initially angry, but once it came out with information about his family, I understood. I definitely think the Bruins need to go in a different direction because I do think he is, fragile mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's fine. We don't all have the same psyche, and I'm not trying to pick on him for that. But I think uh, a, a change of scenery might do him well because it's not easy to play in Boston in any sports.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that you do, you're going to be under the microscope. And I hope he can come back this year and play at a high level. But if the Bruins make the playoffs, I don't have confidence that he can win a Stanley Cup or be that Stanley Cup winning goalie because he's just failed too many times in the past with the Stanley Cup on the line or the next playoff series on the line for me to have confidence in him.
All right. So I, I'm not as down on Rask as you are, obviously. There's no question that his playoff failures are a knock against him. And they're absolutely a knock against him, even in my book. He has not been able to win the cup. He has not been able to come through in the clutch moments when the Bruins needed him the most. He hasn't been able to steal that one game and really come through in the big moment. But he's still been a phenomenal goaltender for his NHL career. His career numbers are off the charts. He's won a ton of games. He's won a Vezina Trophy. His save percentage and goals against are fantastic every single year. The playoffs are certainly a knock against him because he hasn't gotten it done. But at the same time, I think there's been some instances where the team hasn't really helped him. I think the St. Louis series,
Yeah, he's
in
still on his head. I'll give him that.
in 2019, him losing Game 7 to the Blues was not his fault. That was a team in front of him that just did not show up in Game 7.
It was
And
embarrassing on their home ice. It
it
was
was embarrassing on their home ice, and that the goal at the end of the first period with like 7 seconds left or whatever it was when Marchand
yeah,
was
that's right.
lollygagging to the bench because he thought the period was over, and St. Louis scored with 7 seconds left, which pretty much iced that game because I believe that made it 2-0, and I knew right then and there that
And
game
they were
was
so
over.
lifeless, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. Yeah.
No, but the Bruins did not show up in Game 7 in 2019. You cannot hold that one against
No.
Rask. 2013, Chicago was the better team. I actually think that 2012-13 Chicago team is the greatest post 2005 lockout team that the NHL has seen. I think that Chicago team was unreal. They were on, that was a shortened season because of the half season lockout in
Yep.
2012-13. If that team had played a full season, I think they would have broken the record for most wins in a season and most points in a season by a team. That's just my personal opinion. That's all hypothetical, but I don't discredit the Bruins for losing to that Chicago team. Now, Rask has struggled in the playoffs. He has not been able to beat Tampa Bay. That 2018 series, he was not good. And he struggled in other playoff series as well. So that's certainly a knock against him. Looking ahead to this year, it's Rask's last season of his current contract. It might be his last season in Boston. What are you looking for from Rask this year? Do you think he can carry this team to the playoffs? Do you think he can carry them deep into the playoffs? Or I think I know the answer to that. But just your thoughts on him for this particular season.
I think he can carry them deep into the playoffs. Honestly, I do. I do think he can carry them. I think he can be a solid goaltender in the regular season. And That's the most mystifying part to me. There's just some situations where he looks really good. For instance, in the Columbus series last year, he stood on his head.
Yeah, he was outstanding.
Yeah, he was absolutely great in that series. And I do think he's going to need help. I do think he's going to need help. I do think he's going to need a couple days off here and there because of
Well,
rest.
and we have Halak, which I think is huge because
Yeah,
Halak has proven that he can step right in.
right. And I think he can lead us deep into a playoff series. Can he get the job done in a game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals?
He
You talk
hasn't.
about that Chicago team, 2 goals in 24 seconds. I mean, they were good, but 2 goals in 24 seconds. And granted, the defense of the Bruins wasn't good in that instance either. But I just have my doubts. I
Yeah,
mean,
no, I completely
and
understand that.
I know that you know that I have my doubts, and the
Hmm.
listeners could probably tell that I have my doubts, and I have a biased opinion on this. I'll be upfront right now, but I just have my doubts of when it matters most. Adam Vinatieri of the Patriots. You could always count on him for a game-winning field goal. David
Yep.
Ortiz, a walk-off home run. Tuukka Rask in crunch time. Nope.
Well, I agree with you on that. I have my doubts about whether he can actually finish the job. But I just think he's been a great goaltender. He just there seems to be just some sort of disconnect there in the big moment.
Yeah.
And he can't get that one save that you need. Like that Chicago series, you talk about 2 goals in 24 seconds. If he gets one stop there's a chance that goes a totally different way and Boston gets their second cup in 3 years.
Yeah, and I think he's a good goaltender. I just have my questions about him in the clutch, and it's hard to
Hmm.
find good goaltending, and that's why Tim Thomas in 2011 was just so amazing because
Yeah.
he was in his early 30s, but that's kind of late for an NHL player to really play at a high level, and he did that. But I just have my doubts about him getting it done in the clutch. I think he can get it done and lead the Bruins even deep into the playoffs, but given how Halak performed last year either. I don't know if I would want him in a game 7, with the game on the line either. So I don't know. I mean, I think you just have to score 75 goals and hope for a game 7 win.
All right, man, we're going to wind down here, but just one last question.
Yep.
Given the Bruins lineup, what it looks like now, given their division that they're in with the realigned East Division, simple, do the Bruins make the playoffs?
No,
Really?
they do not make the playoffs because of the losses on defense and just the speed in their division. They do not make the playoffs. This is a rebuilding year, just like it is for all New England sports this year, it seems. But I will say this: if they don't make the playoffs, Don Sweeney has to be put under the microscope a little bit.
Oh, I
Due,
think he'll be gone if they miss the
yeah.
playoffs.
No, I think if they don't make the playoffs, I think Don Sweeney, may be looking for a new job.
I do have them making the playoffs. I think it will be as either the number 3 or the number 4 team in that division, but I don't think they're going to be bad enough to miss the playoffs. So I do have them making it. I'm curious now, who are your 4 playoff teams from the East Division then?
My 4 playoff teams for the East Division would be Pittsburgh.
Okay.
I mean, Washington. I see Philly making it,
Mhm.
and I also see the Islanders.
Okay.
Pittsburgh just because they somehow seem to make it all the time, and then Philadelphia, they're scrappy. Washington, they always seem to be there in their seasoned veterans in the
Mhm.
playoffs. Like I said, that Pittsburgh pick may be a little rough, but I don't know. I just see them missing by the skin of their teeth, meaning Boston.
Oh,
I don't
all
see them
right.
missing it badly, but
I think see I'm very down on Pittsburgh heading into this year. I think they've had an awful off season and they're a declining team anyway. Um, So I have Pittsburgh out and Boston in, but I think I agree with the rest of your playoff teams. Philly, Washington, the Islanders, I agree with. I think those are playoff level teams. I think Boston will be number 3 or number 4. I think the Rangers will actually be the first team out of the playoffs. They're just going to miss. And then Pittsburgh will be below the Rangers, and then Buffalo and New Jersey won't be anywhere near competitive.
I see Pittsburgh making it by the skin of their teeth. I think this is one of their final playoff runs.
Yeah, I mean their
Final big
window is
playoff runs.
closing quickly.
Yeah, so is Boston.
Well,
So
that's true as well. I agree that Boston's window is certainly on the getting shut here. So they I can't see them not making it. But I mean, this division is going to be so difficult. There's going to be probably two very good teams left on the outside looking in of the playoff picture from this East Division. So I'm not. It's certainly no guarantee that Boston gets in. I think they will. I'm predicting them to, but it's going to be a dogfight all year long.
and it's going to prepare them for the playoffs if they do make it, because it's going to be, like you said, a tough division. So I'm going to be interested to see what happens. It's going to be a very, very pivotal year for the direction of the Bruins moving forward, I think, depending on how they do.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Because if it's a bad year and they don't make it, I think you're going to see some big time changes from the top down with this Bruins team. And they're going to probably go into some sort of retool, rebuild mode and try and do a quick rebuild, kind of like the Rangers have,
Right,
where they'll be really bad for a couple years, but then be right back on the upswing again. Or at
right.
least that's what they'll try to do. But we've gone for over an hour and 15 minutes now, man, which is absolutely awesome. Trying to keep this show between an hour to hour and a half. So, everyone, that's gonna wrap it up for episode 1 of Black and Gold Weekly. And Danny, I want to give you a huge, huge thank you for coming on for episode 1. It was great to have you, man.
Absolutely. I look forward to being back. Hopefully, maybe
Oh
we'll have some
yeah,
hockey news to
definitely.
talk about.
You're on the reoccurring guest list for sure.
I'm
Um,
honored.
People can find Danny on Twitter, DJaillet95 on Twitter. Am I right?
You are
Yep.
right.
So you can definitely, I'll throw that down in the description as well if you want to give him a follow on Twitter. He's a huge Boston sports fan. We went to college together. We've been friends for a long time now. And it was great to have you, as I said. And make sure, guys, you hit that subscribe button to this channel. Hit that thumbs up button as well on the video. That really helps a lot in getting more people to see the video and learn about this show. And also, you can follow my Twitter, BNG Weekly, on Twitter as well. It's there on the screen. That's where I will be posting, for this channel. This is kind of the Twitter account that goes along with this channel. Like I said, a huge thank you to Mark Allred and everyone at the Black and Gold Productions team who for having me do this show and having me be a part of the team there. This show is in partnership with Black and Gold Productions LLC. Great sports media company covering the Bruins. They have a website, blackandgoldhockey.com. They have multiple podcasts within our podcast network, which you can find on the website. And a lot of great articles coming out on the website as well. So really, really excited about that, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Really, really appreciate it. Hopefully you'll be back next week for episode 2. And that is going to do it for episode 1. Have a great, great new year and a great weekend, guys.